Sustainable future. I wonder what the world will be like 50, 100 years from now. With the climate changing as it is, we may not even be able to imagine the future. As climate scientist Kate Marvel writes on her blog, we are sending our children to an unfamiliar planet. As a species, we have outgrown the way that we live. It's not sustainable and something has to change. But we don't yet know how. When I think about all this, I think of the hermit crab, don't you? Hermit crabs don't grow their own shell, instead they live inside shells that they find. When they need a new one, they go looking for a bigger one, wearing their current shell all the while. Now, say the hermit crab's current shell represents the way we're currently living, and the new bigger shell they're looking for represents our new future way of living sustainably. It's a bigger way of thinking, calling us to expand our idea of what's possible on a finite planet. But the thing is, when the hermit crab moves from one shell to the next, he must become temporarily shellless, soft and vulnerable, taking a risk, scurrying towards a new life. As a planet, I see us stranded between this shell and the next. We are vulnerable. We have outgrown our current ways, but the future hasn't materialised yet. I see us ungrounded, uncertain and afraid. But there's no use trying to go back to our old ways. That shell no longer fits. The only way is forward. And what's more, we won't get to our new shell unless we focus on looking for it, without wasting time hesitating or looking back. This series invites you to try on some new ways of thinking and to ask yourself questions about what a beautiful future on Earth could look like. Ancient versus modern. What will a sustainable future look like? Science fiction loves to show us cities in the clouds, or flying cars, or futuristic tribes in a wilderness land, farming and wearing animal skins whilst technology is long forgotten. But what is the real-life answer? As David Attenborough once said, anyone who believes in infinite growth on a finite planet is either mad or an economist. We know that a future which is kind to the earth will have to be very different. In my time travelling around Devon, I've met many along the way who have chosen a low-impact life and wondered if we could turn to them for answers. I've met supertramps who can sleep anywhere without a tent or build their own bender at the drop of a willow. One such traveller was Sarah, who at 22 could hitchhike anywhere, carrying a modest backpack which she'd made herself. You see, Sarah was a specialist in prehistoric living and could survive in the wild for months with nothing but the tools and the buckskin clothes that she'd made by hand. Life seemed simple for her, and in my head I romanticised her wild woman ways. And Sarah would then quickly crush my illusions by pulling a Ginster's pasty out of her backpack. "Where did you get that?" I'd ask, incredulous. "I thought you just travelled from organic farming community to organic farming community." "Well, yes I do," she replied, "but via service stations." To me, Sarah's lifestyle highlighted that contrast between what's ancient and what's modern. Whilst she knew how to live off the land, she also owned a smartphone and a credit card. The question for us as a species is this: how can we reclaim the relationship with our planet that we've all but forgotten, yet embrace the vital roles that technology can play in our future? Surely our future will rely on both. How will we get around in the future? What would you invent if you could invent anything at all? I asked my friends down the pub one evening. "Some kind of teleporter," said Paul, "like in Star Trek, but not for beaming up, just for beaming around the city, maybe even for getting from the living room to the bathroom if I was really lazy." "I'd prefer a flying car," Steve counted. It'd have silver doors that open upwards instead of sideways and run on banana skins and old tin cans and bolts of lightning. Have you seen the price of diesel these days? And what's more, you won't want all those car fumes going up into the sky if that's where you're going too. At first I thought it was just those two going on about science fiction again and screaming, "Where's my hoverboard?" But the more people I asked, the more I got the same kind of responses. A bullet train that could cross the ocean with no friction and no fuel. A car that could leapfrog and avoid congestion on the M5. All my friends dreamt of better, faster, cleaner, cheaper modes of transport. When it comes to a sustainable future, requiring lower emissions and less pollution, transport is a major consideration. We have a society built on travelling unwalkable, unbikeable distances every day, often at 60 miles an hour. But as Einstein said, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. We need radical new thinking. Perhaps not as radical as my friend Chris's suggestion that the ultimate all-weather mode of transport for Devon would be open-toed wellies. But perhaps we need to stop asking how we can get further, faster. Perhaps we need stronger local communities so we travel less far, work nearer home, meet online where we can, and travel sustainably. Perhaps we need to stop trying to get further, faster, and start coming home. Boycott everything. During a Dartmoor exploration, I met Ollie, a resourceful young man who set himself the very reasonable goal of living at carbon zero. This meant he aimed to create no carbon footprint, so he could rest easy knowing he was not polluting the planet. The trouble is, this seemingly reasonable goal is almost impossible to achieve in a world that uses fossil fuels for producing and transporting everything. Ollie's answer was simple. Boycott everything. Wearing no more than shorts, sandals, and his ample beard, and carrying the biggest backpack I'd ever seen, Ollie moved through the world without money, a modern-day forager, ensuring that no object was produced entirely for his benefit. Anything second-hand or dumped in a skip was fair game, and hitchhiking ensured no additional fuel was burned on his account. I was struck by how much excess our society must throw away on a daily basis for Ollie's lifestyle to work. By the time we met, he had already lived happily this way for 5 years. And certainly Ollie's life was low impact, but was it sustainable? His answer was no, because it relied on wasteful, unsustainable society. I was fascinated by his lifestyle, but he himself had lost faith in it. Now I've no carbon footprint, so what? He said in the end. At uni, I majored in film. If I had a laptop and a camera and a rented flat, I wouldn't be living so green, but I could make documentaries, get other people to live green too. If I could get 10 people to cut down their emissions, I'd be making more difference than I am by myself. And he has a good point. When making personal change and encouraging collective change conflict, which is more important? And which will take us further towards a sustainable future? Tinker's Bubble. Embedded in deepest Somerset, Tinker's Bubble is the UK's oldest low-impact community. The grounds are up a hill in the forest, and the community can support about 10 residents at any one time. Everyone lives in a wooden cabins made from on-site trees, cut into planks using a steam engine-powered sawmill. The community grows most of its own food and makes a little money selling produce in order to buy anything they can't grow. It's an inspirational place, but it also sounds like hard work. The first I heard about Tinker's Bubble was when my friend and bandmate Jack moved there with his family. I still remember the first time he called to invite me for a visit and a band practice. "All right, Kimwei, I'm just ploughing the field this morning, but why don't you come by later for a rehearsal? I'll send you directions, but hang on, no, I've got to go. I've just got to turn the horse." Needless to say, I packed my guitar into the van and set off, curious to see this horse for myself. When I arrived, Jack showed me the porch he was building to extend his wooden house. Each log he used to build the structure had to be laboriously stripped using a hand tool. He stood over the bench, pulling the tool over the log to show me the method. After rehearsing, we sat around an outdoor fire with the whole community. People were happy, sharing stories from the day and contemplating tomorrow when they planned to harvest the plums and make jam. Could everyone live like this in the future? Maybe, maybe not. But one thing is for sure. Tinker's Bubble shows us an example of how it's possible to live well without fossil fuels. It takes hard work and commitment, and it takes working together. But surely a sustainable future is worth working hard together for. Rebelling for life. This Easter, protesters set up residence at major sites in central London, arriving from all over the country to set up what felt like a climate awareness festival. The four main sites were Parliament Square, Marble Arch, Oxford Circus and Waterloo Bridge, and they sprang up overnight, complete with fully amplified stages, vegan kitchens, well-being and information marquees, all fully staffed. The programme included talks by Gail Bradbrook and Rupert Reed, live music from the likes of Nick Mulvey, Sam Lee and Massive Attack, and of course a samba drum group which moved from site to site. I was fortunate enough to witness a multi-faith and humanist service at Oxford Circus, where right on that iconic crossroad, a pink boat bearing the words "Tell the Truth" formed the backdrop for a raised platform stage. Over 100 were gathered to listen as speakers from many different faiths gave their sermons in turn. After that, Rachel Rose Reid took the stage and said, "To face something as enormous as climate change, we need to all come together, people of all beliefs and cultures." She then led the ad hoc congregation in a song with words in Hebrew, English, and wordless sounds to include all. This is the first time I have ever witnessed such multi-faith togetherness. This video series has asked the question of what it would take for us as humans to create a sustainable future. Being at Extinction Rebellion gave me a glimpse of the kind of collective experience we need to feel like a community, to be together in our sadness for the world, and to feel motivated to take action towards changing it for the better. Thoughts on a sustainable future. This video series has been inviting you to ask yourself questions about what a beautiful future on Earth could look like. With David Attenborough's programme Climate Change, The Facts having been recently broadcast, and socio-political movement Extinction Rebellion's biggest protest to date taking place in London recently, global warming is a hot and current topic to say the least. David Attenborough has said, "The science is now clear that urgent action is needed. What happens now and in these next few years will profoundly affect the next few thousand years." Extinction Rebellion spokesperson Gail Bradbrook comments to the press, "I apologise to those people who've experienced disruption from the protests, but what they need to know is that the collapse of civilization is a strong possibility." Former Met Office Chief Scientist Julia Slingo sums it up by saying, "Climate change has simply become the human issue." More than ever, we need radical new ways of thinking and of inhabiting the Earth. In this series, we've explored the importance of returning to ancient ways, of embracing modern technology, of personal change in reducing our carbon footprints, of community low-impact living, of protest and multi-faith cooperation. But what do we need the most? A good place to start, of course, is science, and it plays a major part, as does art. What I've learned through these explorations is that none of this is about the individual. Climate change is a collective issue for all humans. And if we are to face something as huge as the future of the planet, we need all of these ingredients and more. We need science to feed our actions and art to help us feel it so that we can act. More importantly, we need togetherness. The point is to feel it together so that we can act together.